Welcome to the Jane Healey Happy Hour, the podcast that explores new and exciting novels of all genres. I'm your host, bestselling historical fiction author Jane Healey, and in today's episode, we welcome author and Congressman Steve Israel to discuss his latest novel, The Einstein Conspiracy, which has been called a gripping, impeccably researched thriller that captures a nation at a crossroads. Again, welcome, Steve. I should
Jane,
hold up my book.
I am such a fan and so honored to be doing this with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do a little bio on you, and then
Sure.
we will go into my tons of questions. All right. Steve Israel served in the U.S. Congress from 2001 to 2017, including as chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He later opened Theodore's Books, an independent bookstore in Oyster Bay, and now directs the nonpartisan Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University's Brooks School of Public Policy. Israel is the author of 3 novels, most recently, The Einstein Conspiracy. His commentary has appeared on CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and The Atlantic. He also leads Little Round Chop Productions, supporting film, television, and stage projects. Again, welcome.
Oh, good to be with you.
Thank you. So, I love to read how authors came up with their ideas for stories. And so I want to talk about this was the result of a car ride where you came across a cottage where Albert Einstein penned a famous letter. So can you talk about the idea, where the idea for the story came about?
Sure. I had the idea when I was serving in the House of Representatives. I served from 2001 to 2017, and I loved coming upon these moments in history. And I know that you and I agree on that. These kind of lesser known moments in history that helped change the fate of the world. And one day I happened to be driving on the North Fork of Long Island, and I had heard a rumor that Albert Einstein actually lived there in a little cottage overlooking a harbor. And I convinced my wife to come with me and see if we could find that cottage. Well, we did. It's still there. Hasn't changed much since 1939 when Albert Einstein lived there. But what was historic about that house, Jane, was that that was where he wrote a letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to President Roosevelt in the summer of 1939, warning him that Adolf Hitler was developing an atom bomb and that the United States needed to begin a crash program of atomic research. What kind of pulled at me, and I'm curious about how you respond to these moments and these tugs. What tugged me on that was that I knew that Albert Einstein was a lifelong pacifist. And I began
Mm-hmm.
wondering, like, what was it? What brought him to the point where he had repudiated his pacifism and was now writing a letter to President Roosevelt urging him to build a bomb capable of incinerating entire cities. So I began doing some research. I learned that the Nazis had an aggressive effort to do harm to Albert Einstein, that the
Mm-hmm.
Nazis had a very sophisticated spy network throughout the United States. So I put it all together and began working on this book.
So interesting. So talk about your research for the story. I love to talk about research process. I'm such a
Mhm.
research nerd. I'm sure you are too. What was your process in terms of research, and was there anything that you were really surprised by? Anything you discovered that was
Yeah.
surprising?
Well, I'm like you. I love the research, but as you know, it's hard to pull off a work of fiction that is based on nonfiction, right? The bargain that we have with readers is they're going to pay us money for a book, and they want to enjoy that book. They want to learn something,
Hmm.
but they got to keep turning the pages. And so I had to always be tempering my research. My agent and my editors, warned me that if you want to write a nonfiction about Albert Einstein's letter, go ahead. Probably no one will buy it. But if you want to write fiction, just keep it propulsive. So my approach was to learn everything I could. When you're dealing with a real life character, you have to have fidelity to that character. When you're writing
Hmm.
fiction, you can create, figments of your imagination or features of your imagination. You can build characters with depth and complexity based on your own creativity. But when you're dealing with a real person, you have to be true to everything from mannerisms, thought processes, dialect, And so I read everything I could about Albert Einstein and other real life characters who surrounded him that summer. I once asked Eric Larson, who I think is one of the best writers of
Oh,
historic
so
non.
good.
I once asked him, I moderated a conversation on his most recent book, Demon of Unrest, about Fort
Hmm.
Sumter. And I said, how do you avoid falling into that research rabbit hole where you end up spending days trying to research and explore something? And he gave me the greatest response. He said, I just fall deeper. And
Ah.
isn't that great?
Hmm.
I didn't want to fall too deep because again, it's fiction. It's a propulsive spy thriller, but I love bringing in those real life moments and people and historic anecdotes.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think that when you read like some sort of fun random fact about Albert Einstein or their era, that's the stuff that readers love too. Like, did that really
Exactly.
happen? I didn't know that. I love that. I so that actually one of my other questions was, what was your character development process like? Because I've written biographical fiction and
Mhm.
complete historical fiction. I find writing about a real person in history much more difficult. I think it's a blessing and a curse when it's a real person, and so what was your character development process like for Einstein and the other characters in this story?
So Einstein and I became best friends for the 4 years that I worked on this project. And I began by reading Walter Isaacson's kind of seminal biography about him, Genius.
Oh yeah.
Then I began reading as much as I could about Einstein by Einstein. So, and that was tough because I really sucked in science and physics as a student growing up on Long Island. I read his speeches. I didn't have to develop his character. He developed it for me. The trick was inserting that character into these moments of vulnerability where the Nazis
Hmm.
were closing in on him as they did, and getting into his mind, particularly on the issue of what brought him to this moment where he was willing to renounce his lifelong pacifism to warn FDR. What I learned about him, which fascinated me, and I thought so fit into the story, was he was vulnerable and clever at the same time. So there was, he didn't care about his own security. Many true stories about how his wife Elsa would yell at him because he wasn't careful, despite the fact that the Nazis had tried to kill him at least twice that we know of. There were probably other operations that failed, but we know of two. So he has this vulnerability, this kind of the caricature of Einstein walking barefoot, tying a rope around his pants, the crazy hair. Um, but he was also quite clever. He knew that that caricature of himself, that image, was popular enough to put him on the front pages of the New York Times, to
Hmm.
make him a true celebrity. And he used that celebrity to advocate on behalf of Jews in Germany and ultimately to get a letter to Roosevelt saying, build the bomb.
Yeah, so remarkable. Yeah, like I said, I'm obsessed with this
Hmm.
era in history. I want to talk about the historical context now too. I was aware of the pro-Nazi rally in
Hmm.
Madison Square Garden in 1939, was it? Was that the year?
February of 1939. That's exactly right.
Yeah, 20,000 people
Yeah,
because I wrote about it in my novel, Good Night from Paris.
I
And
loved.
oh, thank you. Thank you
Yes,
so much. And
yeah.
I was I was surprised reading about it at the time doing the research at what a
Hmm.
large pro-Nazi presence, including Charles Lindbergh, were in America at that time period. And I'm wondering, like, are readers when they read this story surprised at the
Yeah.
pro-Nazi movement in America at the time?
I think that was the research that stunned and shocked me the most, how
Yeah.
normalized and open the pro-Nazi movement was. That rally at Madison Square Garden where the marquee that night said, hockey game on Wednesday, pro-America rally tonight. And it wasn't a pro-America rally. It was a pro-Nazi rally where you had swastikas, as you know,
Yes.
swastikas draped around the garden
Mm-hmm.
next to a banner of George Washington and speakers calling for the just extraordinary deep hatred against Jews. They didn't, in their speeches, they criticized President Roosevelt, calling him Rosenvelt, as if he was Jewish. So
Yeah.
just the deep anti-Semitism normalized because it was at Madison Square Garden. And then the second thing I learned, which just knocked my socks off, was there was a Nazi camp operating on Long Island. Now I knew about this place. It was called German Gardens in a town called Yaphank. And so I'd known about it. I had known that this is where Nazi Americans trained. Tens of thousands of people would converge on this place to practice goose step marching, to call for the extermination of Jews in America. I knew all about that. I also knew that the streets in this community were named officially by the county of Suffolk: Adolf Hitler Street, Hermann Goring Street, Joseph
Unbelievable.
Goebbels Street. Could you believe that? That American
No.
flags flew next to swastika banners. But here's what I didn't know until I did the research, went down that rabbit hole. So normalized was this place that the Long Island Railroad, a government entity, a government authority, decided that they could profit from it. And they ran special trains to Yaphank on weekends called the Camp Siegfried Special, where these people would dress up like Nazis, brown shirts, with their swastika lapel pins and their swastika banners, get on the Camp Siegfried Special, pay their tickets, go out to Yaphank, have a day of hatred, and then head back to Penn Station in New York City. That was sanctioned, normalized by the government. And so I try and bring that in a very significant way into the story. Here's Albert Einstein fleeing the Nazis, comes to America where he believes he's safe. Little does he know that not very far away from where he lives is a community that names its streets after Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, I had never heard of that camp or
Mhm.
that community. That was unbelievable. So I'm
Yeah.
sure people must always be like, was that even true? When they're reading this, it's crazy.
To
Yeah.
your point, the greatest feedback I've had on this book is when people say, I read this passage and I just didn't think it could be true. So I Googled it and I got goosebumps when I learned
Yeah.
it happened.
Crazy, crazy. Also to the historical context, I want to read a part of a review from the Times of Israel and have you comment on it because I loved it. The Einstein Conspiracy succeeds because it does what the best novels do. It enlarges our moral imagination while sharpening our moral clarity. It reminds us that history is not safely behind us, that evil does not announce itself politely, and that defending a humane, rules-based society sometimes requires painful and difficult choices. This is a novel with urgency, depth, and relevance. First of all, what a beautiful review.
Yes.
But talk about the relevance. And I think a lot of us are looking at history and how history repeats itself. And we can talk about the theory of like the 80 to 100 year kind of things start
Mhm.
over again. Talk about that and the relevance of this story and the late 1930s and 1940s to today.
It's such a great question, Jane. What really propelled me in this book was not just writing a thriller that I hope people would buy, but um, letting people know that the hate that we see today, and I don't care whether it's on the left or the right,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not new, and that it was even
Nope.
normalized. And I have to say, with all due respect to everybody's politics, this is not a partisan statement. When I see that hate expressed either on college campuses, where people are saying death to anybody, or
Mm-hmm.
when I see it on T-shirts on January 6th at the Capitol, where I used to work, T-shirts that said Camp Dachau or Camp Auschwitz. That's not very far away from what we saw in the
No.
1930s. And so I did want to make those times relevant to the choices that we must make today.
Yeah, no, it was and that was that I felt like that review really framed it, in
Hmm.
terms of what you were trying to do. I have some writing questions
Yes.
that I ask everybody. So, what is your process like? This is your third novel. Are you a plotter? Do you plot things out? Do you write by the seat of your pants? Is it somewhere in between? What's your process?
So my first two books were political satires that I wrote while I was in Congress as therapy. And political satires, I have to say, are easier to write. It's tongue in cheek. It's moving briskly. My Christopher Buckley was my kind of mentor in
Hmm.
writing satire. Carl Hyacin. Plot structure is not as complex as a spy thriller, as you well know.
No.
Um, and so
Yeah.
my process was my satires, literally, I'd be sitting on the floor of the House or in a committee hearing, and I would hear somebody say something totally absurd and say to myself, well, nobody would ever believe this if I told them. And nobody would care about it if I wrote it as a nonfiction. So I'll write it as satire. And this is how I'll tell people what really goes on in the doors behind the doors of the Capitol. This was different. And so my writing process had to adjust to it. The first year and a half, I kind of blended writing. I wake up at first thing in the morning. I'm curious about your own writing regimen. Mine is, for some reason, my subconscious is still very active when I wake up. My imagination is firing. I have a greater tolerance for what seems to be implausible in the morning. And so I just write, write, write. Then I will spend as much time as I have during the day doing some fact checking, doing some research. And so I would go back and forth. And finally, that process, 50-50 research and writing at the beginning. But as I did the research, I would realize, I'm sure you went through this as well, that something I wrote 5 chapters ago didn't make sense anymore because the
I
research,
know.
right? Right. So
Yes.
I can see you're having your own PTSD right now. The
Totally.
research required that I go back, right, and tug
Hmm.
at something, and that changed the balance and changed the plot. So there was a lot of back and forth on that. And then finally, I'd say the final 6 months, I had an exceptional editor at a publishing company called Compass Rose. The final 6 months was responding to his notes to keep the book propulsive. Well,
Hmm.
I'll tell
Hmm.
you, my that Madison Square Garden incident that you wrote, it's in the book. Jane, I wrote 20 pages. And I had it down to what they were serving at the kiosks in Madison Square Garden, 20 pages. And my editor, his note was, kind of reflects what I said before. If you want to write a book about the Madison Square Garden rally in February 1939, go for it. But you're not writing a book about that. So trim this from 20 pages down to 4. Have you ever gone through that?
Oh yeah, I think that like as as writers and researchers, we're like, but this is so interesting.
Yeah,
But but it does if it doesn't move the narrative forward,
exactly.
that's when the editors are like, you can cut this down to a paragraph. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't have
Yeah.
to
And
be.
it's the most, isn't it the most painful thing that you go
It
through when you,
is,
when you
right?
start
Kill
cutting
your
part of it
darlings. I
out? That's
know.
right. That's right.
So true. And so so this is really your first historical fiction novel
Mhm.
then.
Yeah.
I'm always interested about like how did you balance historical fact versus weaving in the fiction to make it a thriller? And were there any kind of rules you adhered by? How did you do that?
So I have two I had two very good models. One was Forsyth's Day of the Jackal,
Mm.
about an attempted assassination of the French president de Gaulle, which we know
Mm-hmm.
didn't happen. But I think structurally, that's kind of the gold standard for making that balance between history, fidelity to history, not rewriting
Mm-hmm.
history, but keeping people on their edge of the seat at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And the other was Ken Follett's Eye of the Needle,
Um,
about a German agent who is trying to figure out whether the Allies are going to invade France and where in France. Also, just filled with just gripping historic detail, but always moving
mm-hmm.
impulsively.
Yep.
So
Keeping it along.
I kind of studied that structure
Mm-hmm.
and tried to weave that discipline into the book.
I love Follett. I He has a really great online course on BBC Maestro that I took. Like
Is
it's
that
like,
right?
yeah, it's really good. And
Yeah.
he seems like a delightful guy and he's so
Hmm.
brilliant. And yeah, I found that really helpful.
Hmm.
Um, so what part of the writing process do you find the most challenging and what part do you enjoy the most?
Well, I enjoy when my imagination can just ends up splashing on a page. I
Hmm.
enjoy that creative process, just the creativity, the creative process. Um, the hard part is my own kind of struggle was again balancing my love of history and these historic moments and oddities with my love of a reader who's
Hmm.
going to want to keep reading.
Yes.
So that was, very often a struggle. I'd come upon something extraordinary that Einstein did, or that the FBI was doing, or that J. Edgar Hoover did.
Oh, he was a good
And
character too. I
yeah, oh, isn't
know.
he? Isn't he?
Oh.
I would have to just kind of throttle back,
Hmm.
give a flavor of the history, keep it authentic, but
Yes.
keep the pages turning.
Yes, I always, I was saying I was at a conference this weekend with a bunch of writer friends, and I feel like for every page that's in one of my books, there's like 7 pages that didn't end up in there, because of the
Right.
research and tidbits that you couldn't include, but that's how you get it done, I guess. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I want to read this quote that I loved
Mhm.
from it was a New York Times essay that you wrote called "Why a Book Tour is More Brutal Than a Political Campaign." Um, Writing a book is deeply personal. Politicians put on protective gear. Fictions writers take it off, fully exposing their creativity, emotions, fantasies. It's like unburdening oneself on a therapist couch, only every reader on earth is your therapist. So talk about this difference. I loved it. I thought it was so
Thank
funny and
you.
so painfully true.
That
You
essay went
know?
kind of viral. So, look, 16 years in Congress, I was a town board member. I'd been through election after election. I represented New York. People are not shy about telling you how much you suck in New York
I'm
if you're a
sure.
politician. They will just get right in your face. And it didn't bother me in the slightest. It didn't because I knew, okay, their politics is different than mine. They're not happy about a vote that I cast. Maybe they had a fight with a spouse and they're in a bad mood. Would roll off me.
Hmm.
My second book, Big Guns, which is a satire of the influence of the gun lobby in Congress, I was invited to a book signing in Sharon, Connecticut. There's an old library in Sharon, Connecticut, and it was packed with authors at tables signing books. And I had this stack of Big Guns. And I was used to, as a member of Congress, I was in Congress at the time. I was used to people coming up to me. I was on television all the time, MSNBC, CNN, Fox.
Hmm.
Wherever I went, I was used to people coming over and asking for a picture or shaking hands. But in this case, nobody was interested. And part of that was because there were like best-selling Simon Winchester was on one
Oh,
side of
wow, yeah.
me, right? There are these
Hmm. Yeah.
best-selling historic authors, and I'd have this pile, and the title of the book was Big Guns. It was a satire. People would come and pick up the book and like a piece of spongy fruit, at some point, like throw it back down, and it wrecked my soul. It just
It's
wrecked my.
so, I know, it's
You
soul
know what it's like?
crushing. It's so humbling and soul crushing. It's like,
It's
yeah.
soul crushing. And I'd be like, why? So I began thinking, why do I take this personally? But I didn't take personally somebody using the F word to me in front of my kids, when I was in
Right,
Congress.
right. Yeah.
And it's because, as you know, as any writer knows, there's nothing more personal than writing a book.
Nope.
It's you're pouring forth your soul, your dreams, your
Yes.
imagination. And so you do take it more personally when somebody rejects it. I remember one guy coming up to that pile and he goes, "Big guns." He goes, "Will this help me kill bears?" I was like, I turned to my
Come
wife and said,
on.
"We're getting out of here. I can
Yeah.
only take so much."
And we're out. Yeah, that's
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's why I can't read bad reviews. Like I'll read the positive ones, but my husband
I'm with
reads the
you.
bad ones for me.
That's and I bet he says that wasn't so bad, right? But if
Yeah,
you read
right,
it, you
right.
take it as like a knife through your gut,
Oh,
right?
it'll ruin
Yeah.
my day if I read a
Yes.
bad review, so I can't
Yeah.
do it. So you are currently a bookstore owner, which I love indie bookstores.
Oh, thank
Is
you.
there like any sales data or customer feedback or interactions that has shaped the way you write fiction?
Very much so, and it's very, very helpful in this process, in the process of writing the Einstein Conspiracy. My store, it's a small independent bookstore located in Oyster Bay, Long Island. It's called Theodore's Books. Why?
Theodore's books, that's right.
Because Theodore Roosevelt lived up the block from us, and that's
Amazing.
where he lived and died. And he wrote and read. There were 7,000 books on his shelves on the night he died. And so now I had a different perspective, and that perspective was not what do I want to write, but what do my customers want to read?
Mm-hmm.
So my mantra in politics, when I was in Congress, is you meet voters where they are and then tug them along. Don't preach to them what you think. Tap into how they feel, and then try and
Mm-hmm.
bring them along if possible. And I talk to my customers all the time, and I see what they're reading, and I ask them, and that really helped me strengthen the discipline of writing, not just to express myself, but writing to meet the interest of readers who enjoy history, historic fiction, and spy thrillers.
Excellent. So interesting. So actually, that was a question I meant to ask you
Mhm.
regarding the spy thriller form, like structure. Did you think a lot of, because a structure is something I'm kind of obsessed with
Mhm.
now, and I wasn't in the beginning of my writing career, and I
Mhm.
should have been, honestly. Like, did you think a lot about structure when you were mapping out the different perspectives
Oh boy.
and different short chapters, and or was that something that kind of evolved with your process?
So the first draft, no, I wasn't thinking about structure. I'd never written a spy thriller before. My editor asked me to study this technique called Save the Cat. Do you know about Save
Yes.
the
Oh,
Cat?
I'm a big fan.
You're a
Yeah.
big fan.
Yeah.
So my editor helped impose some structure and said, look, you're gonna have a certain number of beats, and in each beat you have
Hmm.
to have a certain content. I will confess that I found it a little at times, and I'm curious about your response, a little too formulaic at times, a little
Hmm.
too confining. And so I guess I adhered to a more relaxed version of Save the Cat where the beats didn't dictate the story, but they did impose some guardrails for me and kept me in
Hmm.
the lane. Did you ever, in your own experience, did you
Yes.
rigidly adhere
So
to Save the Cat?
that's funny you say that. I find the same thing. Like they
Hmm.
Save the Cat structures because there's many multiple structures that Save the Cat offers
Hmm.
in her book. Save the Cat writes a novel.
Yes.
I find it's so granular though that like it can zap your creativity. Like if you're so worried about like
Yeah.
getting all these little pieces, so I kind of look at it as like tent poles, like
Love that.
act one, act two, act three,
Love
where
that.
I kind of have to aim to hit in the middle. So, I think the middle is the hardest part for me. So like that it helps me kind of map that out. But
Yeah.
you're right. I also don't like to be confined by it because that, it can really suck your creativity. Oops,
It
sorry, my
does.
thing froze.
But
Yeah, so yeah, I completely understand what you're talking about there for sure.
I remember it got so granular that, I was told that in the first 5% of the book, which basically takes you to page 8, right? You've got
Right.
to have two beats, one foreshadowing and one a hint of vulnerability in your lead character. And
Yes, or like and or stating the theme, and I'm like, oh, come
yes,
on,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like if it's adding more stress to the creative process, that's not
Right.
good. But I do find like kind of the to hitting the major points along the way
Yeah.
helps me keep it
Yeah.
structured.
And
Yeah.
I think readers want authenticity. I mean, a reader knows
Yes.
when something is formulaic and not.
Oh yeah, and
Um,
they'll tell you.
And they'll tell you, that's right. And
Yeah.
they'll stop buying the books at
Yeah.
my store. So I think I agree with you. Using it, I love that. Using it as kind of a tent pole, uh,
Hmm.
but not a rigid requirement of hitting every beat in every percentage of the book, et cetera, is useful.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what advice do you have for someone who's always dreamed of writing a novel but has never taken the leap?
Oh, that's a good question. So the first bit of advice I would have is make sure you have plenty of aspirin and a nice bottle of wine as you're writing. Now, look, the best advice I give, I'm sure you give the same advice, is just start writing. Just start writing.
Yep.
Don't plan too much. Don't, I never did an outline in my life. Never did an outline for any of my books. I have a Substack. I don't outline my essays. I write for The Atlantic and The Times, elsewhere. In my own experience is that you want your imagination to take the story. At a certain
Hmm.
point, you are going to need a sense of direction, and that's where an outline comes in. So I begin my outlines when I'm about halfway through the book, not
Yeah,
at the
that makes
beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
so the more you worry about process and the beats and the outline and the structure, the less your imagination is working.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
err on the side of your imagination, let it fire, and you can always take care of everything else in your editing process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I
Do
also
you?
think just start writing. It's like just get out of your own way and give yourself permission to start writing. Like don't
I
worry
love it.
about where it's going or like
Yeah.
the, getting, because if you don't sit down and actually like button chair, they always say
Mhm.
like you're never going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's true. Are you working on any new writing projects that you want to share?
I have been asked about a sequel to Einstein. I've had this one character who's based on a real person, an FBI agent who happened to be the second African American special agent of the FBI in the history of the Bureau, a real person. And people have become very intrigued by that character. His name is
Mm,
James Amos.
mm-hmm.
Talking about research, I looked high and low for information about this guy. I knew that he was Theodore Roosevelt's bodyguard, and I ended up having to pay an inordinate amount of money to a rare book dealer in Australia who had the last surviving copy of James Amos's autobiography.
I've
Um,
been there. I've had to do that
right?
too. Yeah.
So, I read that. And so people have said to me, boy, what a great sequel. I was at Vroman's bookstore in California last month. I'm still great news for the book is I keep thinking the book tour is over, but we keep adding dates.
Oh, that's great.
And so I was out at Vroman's in Pasadena, just an amazing bookstore. And a few people from some studios came and they said, we're interested in this James Amos character. We think there may be something. And they're looking at it. But you and I both know that a book adapted for any kind of, whether it's film or television, limited series, it depends on how well the original book does. You can have the greatest idea, the
Yes.
greatest character, but the book has to do well. Thankfully, we're
Mm-hmm.
overperforming right now, but we're not yet at the
Good.
point. Book just came out in November. We're not at the point yet where I feel like the book has the legs necessary to get snapped up for an adaptation. But I've already started, as I'm sure you do. I've already started thinking and doing a little bit of writing on where a sequel would take us. Same kind of period post-Einstein, during World War II, Nazi spy rings operating in New York, and this African American FBI agent trying to track them down. So that would be the premise.
Excellent. That's like right up my alley. I love those.
Hmm.
Obviously, I love that era. I love that. So
Hmm.
good luck with that. That's
Thank you.
exciting. You mentioned your Substack. If you want to give
Yeah.
tell people how people can find your Substack or any other ways that you like to keep in touch with
Yeah, it's
readers.
just it's called Books and Politics, Rep Steve Israel. You can also go to my website, repsteveisrael.com. And I'm doing lots of tours. I've got to get up to your area at a certain point. I've been invited to do something in Boston. We just haven't been able to work it out on the schedule. I've just been invited to do something on the book at the National Book Festival in
Oh,
Washington,
amazing.
D.C. in August, which is the
Congratulations.
greatest honor that I could have. So I'll be in D.C. then, and I'm in the
Excellent.
Hamptons and Eastern Long Island in a few weeks, and we talked about how grueling a tour can be, other than the people who pick it up like a piece of spongy
Right.
food. I love it. I love the interaction and talking to people about their literary interests. And it gives me hope for the country that there are still people
Doesn't it?
interested in holding a book, not reading it on a
Yes.
device, but holding a book.
Yes, I completely agree. Like I said, I was at the Santa Barbara Literary Festival this weekend with a bunch of writer
Mhm.
friends, and we were all saying, I feel like there might be there might be a trend towards like printed books, analog experiences again. I
So
feel like that's my hope. That's my hope for indie bookstores. It's my hope for
yeah.
authors. It feels like we're seeing a little bit of a turn that way.
I
So
think you're right, and we see it in our own store. People come
good.
in and they just want to feel a book. I think there's a sensory overload occurring
Mm-hmm.
with people, and they just want
Yes.
to feel it. They want their fingers to run across a page, and particularly history or historic fiction. I think particularly with America 250, as we commemorate our founding,
Yes.
people may be more tuned to history. That doesn't mean they want to read a biography of George Washington. What makes it accessible is the kind of writing that you do. that kind of historic fiction
Thank
that
you.
brings people into a story, but educates them at the same time.
Yeah, and you as well. Thank you. Yeah, it's encouraging. It's nice to
Mhm.
see. It's nice to hear because I've been hearing some good things like what you just said. So
Mhm.
fingers crossed for all of us, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So that's a wrap, Steve. This was lovely. It was so great
Thank
to
you.
finally meet you. Thank you for being a guest on Happy Hour. Again, the novel is The Einstein Conspiracy. It's available now wherever books are sold. My latest novel is The Women of Arlington Hall. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you again. Congratulations, Steve, and I wish you so much luck with the Einstein Conspiracy.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you. And we're good.
Well, if I get up to Boston, I'll let you know. How far are you from Boston?
Oh, I'm right outside. I'm like the last top stop on the Orange Line.
Oh,
So
okay. So
yeah,
I'll definitely let you know. That would be
please
great to meet
do.
you in person. I'd love to. And if
Yeah,
you're ever on Long
especially.
Island, look me up. Or DC. I commute. Let me know.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, if you're doing any events up here, I'm happy to help publicize them
Oh,
with
that'd be great.
friends and
Perfect.
all of that. So let me know.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take
Stay in
care,
touch.
Steve. Yep,
Bye.
bye-bye.